Hello, my name is Karen Hughes, and I am the Domestic Violence Clinical Services Coordinator for the Life Crisis Center. I want to welcome you to Life Crisis Today. Child abuse is something that we worry about sometimes. If we have children in our lives, I think we worry about that. And we need to know, what do we do and what happens when if something gets reported. With me today is a child therapist from the Life Crisis Center, and her name is Chris Bozick. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, Karen.
Thanks for coming today. I know that you work really hard with some kids who have been abused, and abuse is in our community. When we think about abuse, we want to prevent it. And I know that there's a whole month dedicated to child abuse prevention. Why do you think we need to have prevention like that?
One of the things that I think we all agree on is that children are our most precious resource.
Definitely.
And they are our future. And so we want children to have the best opportunity to be the best they can be as they grow up.
Right.
And parenting is very difficult.
Yes.
It's not easy.
Yes, it is.
And there are a lot of challenges. So one of the things that we try to do is recognize some of the challenges and try to give families tips and resources to help them, be successful as a family.
Right. And kids also think it's their fault.
Often when we look at child abuse, and there are 4 kinds of child abuse that are recognized by law. Mm-hmm. There is sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, and then emotional abuse, mm-hmm. which is mental injury. Mm-hmm. And so those are the 4 parameters of what the law defines.
Okay.
And so we at Life Crisis provide services for children who have experienced maltreatment. Mm. And my role at Life Crisis right now, I'm at the Child Advocacy Center in Wicomico County. So the state of Maryland, in trying to provide services for children, mandated that each county have a Child Advocacy Center.
Right.
And it's a really good concept that's utilized nationwide. Mm-hmm. And it is a multidisciplinary approach. So mm-hmm. we are housed with our local law enforcement, mm-hmm. the state's attorney, mm-hmm. and protective services of social services.
Right.
And then the therapeutic component.
Right.
And then we also have a court advocate who helps families if they do have any legal outcomes. She helps them navigate the
right.
court system.
Trying to understand that court system is confusing. Yeah.
But to give you a sense of the work we do just in Wicomico County, our fiscal year starts July 1st. Mm-hmm. And since then, we've had over 300 investigations.
Wow.
So we have, which have involved 400 children and 600 when you look at the extended
families,
sibling groups.
Right.
So we have already served or had contact with over 1,000 children this year. So when you say, why is it important? The goal is to try to do interventions to keep children
yes.
safe.
Right.
And it's not meant to be punitive. If a child has experienced serious injury, mm-hmm. then there could be legal ramifications mm-hmm. as well. But social services their goal is to try to intervene with families to make sure that children are protected and kept safe.
Right.
So we deal with all those different instances of child abuse, and they're all difficult. And you asked earlier, children think it's their fault.
Yes.
Children want to please. Children love their families, mm-hmm. no matter what. They love their families. Right. And I think parents really want their children to be successful and care about their children. Sometimes they just don't have the tools mm-hmm. or the experience. We learn how to parent from our parents. Mm-hmm. And some of us are better at it than others. The good news is that there are skills you can learn.
Right.
And there can be teachable moments. So
right.
A lot of times with neglect, we see children that might look like neglect because of poverty. Mm. And it's not because families don't want to provide. It's that right now people are really struggling. It's hard to keep a roof over your head. And so a lot of times parents feel frustrated and they might take it out on their kids. So kids, again, want to please. They want to do what the parents want them to do. But one thing we notice too, children don't always have the right words to express what's going on, so they show with behavior. And so that might present in the school, or you might be in Walmart and you see a kid that's really acting out, and you wonder, what do I do? But a lot of times children, they're showing us the stress that they're experiencing with behavior.
Right. If a child is abused in some way, we didn't even speak about domestic violence and witnessing domestic violence. That's one of them as well.
So one of the things, and we as professionals are mandated reporters. And what that means is that if we observe or have information where a child may be experiencing some sort of injury, be it sexual, physical, witnessing domestic violence, or mental injury, we report. We're not investigators. We make a report to social services. And a lot of times, people expect them to step in and do things that the law does not permit them to do. But as mandated reporters, we have to call social services. That includes nurses, doctors, teachers, clergy, anyone who has custody, even if it's during this day, they're responsible for the care of that child. They're considered caregivers, and so that has to be reported if we think there's anything that gives us concern. And then they take it from there.
But even if it's a neighbor, like if I had a child in my neighborhood that I have contact with, and I'm just like, something, something, or they have been playing with my child or my grandchild, and they tell things like, because I feel like that's a safe place to tell. Then anybody can actually report.
Anyone can report, and it's kept confidential. If you make a report, it is. And you can do it anonymously. I mean, they prefer that they have your contact information just so in case they need more information. But yes, any concerned citizen can make a report and their identity is protected. A lot of times if you make a report, a family may assume they know who did it, but they're not given that information.
All right, we've been talking about reporting. So what happens if it does get, what's the steps? What happens?
So at the Child Advocacy Center, our process is the Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services, they have screening and intake. And they, if anyone makes a call, it could be a parent, it could be a neighbor, it could be a teacher, any concerned person that phones a report in, they will get as much information as they can from the reporter, and then based on that, they may or may not do an investigation. Sometimes things are screened out because there's just not enough evidence of harm.
There's criteria that they have to go by.
But if they do open a case, then the social services, they do joint investigations with the police, and they will interview a child. And based on that interview, if they think there's harm that is significant enough, they may be charged. And I'm just giving you an example of cases that go through our center. So if they, we have a multidisciplinary team approach, as I said, and if there is enough indication of harm, sometimes parents are charged or someone who did harm to that child. So if they are charged, generally it's done through grand jury. So it is a process where, you have the grand jury is, people that are uninvolved, have no connection with this family. And if they return an indictment to the state's attorney, then they would be, a warrant would be issued and they would be arrested. So it's very difficult process for families in the sense that generally with child abuse, over 85% of the time, the person doing the harm is someone known to the child. And so this is someone that we talked about earlier that loves that person. And so it's very difficult for a child to share any information about someone that they care about because they don't want to get them in trouble. And they don't want to lose the relationship. Like a lot of times, even if children are being harmed, they still want to be with that person.
I love them.
That dynamic is very challenging. So if the person is arrested, and they might be held in jail. That can have, if it's someone within the family, that can have financial implications for the family. They lose part of the income.
Right.
They lose the emotional support. So the dynamics are very challenging for a family because they're complicated relationships. You might have a husband and a spouse. It can be other children in the family that could be mad. Why did you tell? Like a lot of times, children get mad when it's reported because they want to keep the secret. They want to protect the person.
Right.
Even though they don't like what's happening to them, they're willing to do that for the family.
Yeah.
So we try to help them through that process. So they will make a referral for therapy. And then we have a team. It's not just me. We have 8 therapists that, and we're all, trauma-informed, certified clinicians working. And we have a evidence-based approach that we use to our therapy.
Right.
So we will help the family, we'll help the other. It's like if you threw a pebble into a pond and it just has a ripple effect.
Right.
You have the primary victim, but then you have other layers of people that are harmed emotionally from having to deal with the process. So we try to help them work through the trauma and also give them support.
Yeah.
And right now our family advocate for the CAC, Courtney Bennett, she works with the family directly. So she keeps them posted on any upcoming hearings. She helps them, do a tour of the courtroom so they know what to expect. Because when we get to the point of court, that's another whole nother element of stress for children. Because you have to go in front of
court is stressful, period. Yes.
It is. And you have to go in front of a jury and people that you don't know. And I think the youngest child I've had testify was 5.
Wow.
And it was heartbreaking because this little 5-year-old had to face the person that did them harm, who was someone that the person cared about. And so, we have boys and girls that are victims. It's not just girls. And so for them to have to say what happened to them in front of strangers, in front of a judge, is very difficult.
Right.
And people, can trigger, for a jury, we worry about the jury sometimes because we know this statistically that 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 boys have experienced some sort of sexual abuse, and then physical abuse is not it's not as pervasive, but it can trigger events for them too.
Right.
And it can be very difficult for them to hear the harm that was done.
Right.
And it's a lot of responsibility on a jury because there's usually not evidence. It's not like the crime shows on TV. There generally is not actual evidence. The evidence is the child's word.
Right.
And so it makes it a challenge.
Right.
So our team really tries to help the family work through that. Part of the process, if there is a conviction, if the person, he or she's found guilty, there's a victim impact statement that the victim is allowed to present to the judge, and that goes into the sentencing. There are guidelines that the judge has to follow with sentencing.
Right.
So it can be a very long, complicated process, and it can take over a year.
Yeah.
So we're working with these families for an extended period of time.
Okay. Now, parents have some rights with this.
Definitely. Parents have, parents are the caregivers, and they do not relinquish their rights in doing this. And so sometimes parents aren't able to meet their child's needs, and so they enter the system, foster care, which can be a challenge because a child always wants to be with their parent.
Right.
But the parent does not give up their parental rights. So the state, if that happens, they work with them. Sometimes another avenue with social services that we work with are in-home services. So if a family, say they're really struggling, things are not going well in the family, in-home will try to help link them with resources, link them with parenting classes.
Give them that support that they need.
They do. They try to give them the support they need so that family can remain together, because that is the state of Maryland's goal is to keep families together.
Right.
And so parents do not lose their rights.
Right.
And there are many legal resources for families if they find themselves in a position where they need that support legally. So the Maryland Voluntary Law, helps with pro bono services. There are many resources that if people want to know, they can call our hotline and they can get that information, 988.
Right, right. 988 is also the National Suicide Line,
Yes,
so
it
they can
is.
also call 211
Correct.
for information referral. Right. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Kids sometimes, when we talked about the child abuse, it's grooming happens.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? Because that is like why didn't the child speak up?
Right.
Well, there's a reason they didn't speak up.
And as we said earlier, that the percentage like over 85% of children who experience harm, and we're talking about sexual abuse with grooming, it's someone known to the child, someone they trust.
Right.
And so a person who is trying to do that harm, have that relationship with a child sexually, may offer special privileges to them, may buy them things, may spend special time with them, things that make the child trust them and make them feel special.
Right.
And so that relationship can be very complicated.
Right.
And we see that it can be a grandparent who buys special things for the child. Even giving a child who is maybe living in poverty, they give them candy, things like that make the child feel like they want to please that person.
Right.
And so if they really don't know or understand their sexualness at that age, like at 5 or 6, they don't really understand.
Right.
They can be manipulated, and then often they're told, this is our secret.
Our
this
secret,
is our
yes.
special thing
Yes.
between you and me, and I love you, and we don't need to tell anybody.
Right.
And so children trust, and they want to please, as we
Right.
said, and so a lot of times it can be very confusing for a child. And one of the things that we're really seeing, Karen, right now with the internet, children are exposed to so many things that they don't even understand. And one of the things that we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of children are exposed to pornography. And so their frontal lobes of the brain aren't developed yet. And so they're being exposed to things that can be stimulating to them and very confusing.
Right.
Or sometimes we see older siblings that have been exposed to that, and they're confused, they don't understand, they're curious, and so they want to explore, and so they might act out sexually with a younger sibling.
Right.
And so that can happen a lot, and that can be very challenging for a family trying to, navigate having that older sibling molested the younger sibling, and how to keep
The family
everyone
together,
safe,
right?
and how to
And
keep
safe,
everyone
right.
safe. So that can be really challenging. So we really encourage parents to really monitor and look at what the children are being exposed to on the internet.
Right.
And there's so many things on TikTok, and children are curious, and
Yes.
then it's kind of, oh, this is interesting. What is this? And so they get kind of sucked in, and so we see grooming that can happen with TikTok, where older people posing as a friend is really an adult, and so they pull children in that way. So there are a lot of challenges for parents right now trying to
Right.
have their children be successful, but really monitoring and trying to supervise everything they're exposed to, because then they
I know,
go to
it's so
school and
hard.
they might be riding the school bus, and a kid on the bus touches them inappropriately, and the child doesn't know what to do, and they're afraid.
Right.
So grooming can come in many forms.
Right.
And so, and again, we have a lot of resources at Life Crisis where we try to help families with that. And that can lead also to another element, human trafficking, which, the grooming can be part of that human trafficking, where children, especially vulnerable children, I'll give you $5 if you let me see, a nude photo of you.
Right.
And so there's sexting, kids sending pictures
Right.
of themselves. So there are a lot of challenges today. I don't think we as society have caught up with all the innovations and things that are available.
And then we're getting AI on top of it. I
Yes,
think
yes.
it's going to even get worse for a while.
It is.
Until we figure
is.
it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So what happens if I do suspect something and I want to report it? What do I do?
The abuse has to be reported where it occurred. So and we're at the Tri-County. I work at Wicomico Child Advocacy Center, but we also have the Worcester Child Advocacy Center and Somerset. So with the Tri-County, a lot of our families, and with Delaware, it's a very small area.
Right.
So if it occurred in Wicomico County, you would call the Department of Social Services here in Wicomico. Now, if you want to report child abuse, there's a number that's available, and it will prompt you to say where you think it occurred.
Right.
So sometimes
There's a Maryland number. Right.
So sometimes things happen in Worcester County, but they lived in Wicomico, but it has to be reported where it occurred.
Right.
But if you make a report, you would get someone at Social Services, and they would want as much information as you can provide about what you know or suspect happened to this child. And again, you're not an investigator. We don't want you investigating. We want the trained professionals to do that.
Right. And so if they called Wicomico County DSS, or if they knew the number for Worcester DSS or Somerset DSS, or there's the Maryland number, that would then put it into the right county.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes things happen out of state too.
Right.
And so that can be a little more complicated. And sometimes what happens with our CAC, if say the family was on vacation in the Outer Banks and something happened, our local CAC might do a interview for the sister state.
Okay.
So they do work.
I know
that way
we do it
too.
for other states too. I do know
and
that.
they do
So
it
yes.
for us.
Yes.
Yes. So that can happen as well.
Yeah. Is there anything else? We've gone over a lot of information. We've talked about the process, what is abuse, what is grooming, what happens if a report happens in the court process. Is there anything else that we've forgotten?
I would just encourage parents to know that, parenting is probably the hardest job there
Yes.
is. And it's not to judge or shame people. It's that there's help available.
Right.
And really, I think people want to do the best they can. Sometimes they just don't know how.
Right.
And children can be challenging. They are smart. They they can be difficult at times. So we want people to understand that they're not alone, and that there is help out there, and that but every child deserves to be safe.
Right.
And children are very resilient. They're also very forgiving. And when, I have probably worked over the years with probably 1,000 children. And one thing that I know is that they want to be loved, and they want to be cared about. And they love the people that take care of them.
Yes, they do.
And so, they're our future.
Yes,
We
yes.
want them. The safer our community is because we have good families.
Right.
And so we want people to know that there is help out there.
Right.
And not to feel it's hard to reach out. It really is hard, but there is help available.
Yeah.
And so we hope people will do that. And April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. So you'll see the pinwheels are kind of the symbol that we use, pinwheels for prevention. And so you might see those around the Tri-County area. And we just, anyone that has questions or needs help, we want them to know they can reach out.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Oh.
Great information.
Okay, thank you, Karen.
And I want to thank you for joining us. As I said, child abuse is not an easy topic to talk about, but we do want our children to be safe, and we want them to thrive and be loved. If you do suspect, please go ahead and report it. I know it's kind of scary to do, but we need to keep our children safe. If you need to, our hotline is another resource that you can call, and we can do the reporting as well. Our hotline number is 410-749-HELP. Again, the hotline number is 410-749-4357. We are part of the 211 system, which is information and referral. I don't know about you, but I Google things and try to find things. It take a long time. Don't get frustrated. Call our hotline. We probably have it in the database. We are part of the National Suicide Hotline, and as you heard earlier, that's 988. We have a website, www.lifecrisiscenter.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Please reach out if you need some help. We also have a couple of other programs. We are part of the CASA program, which is a court-appointed special advocate, and that's to help kids who are in the foster care system have a voice in the court system. As we talked about human trafficking, we are the regional navigators for human trafficking for kids from young children up to age 24. We help with case management and getting them resources and making sure that they can be safe too. Please reach out if you need to. There's always somebody to help. I also want to thank PAC 14 for helping to make this show available. Thank you.